did spend 2.5 months in Kibale Forest last year, but the monkey studies that I participated in were over several years, and that was many, many years ago. Japanese monkeys, lion-tailed macaques in India, and a very short study on black and white colobus in Uganda. That's just a part of my background. I also worked as a park ranger for the US National Park Service, and I was the GS lead for mapping the distribution of lions, wild dogs, and cheetahs for Wildlife Conservation Society. Those were probably the most interesting things that I did. I'm retired now, and I spend as much time as possible in Africa. But yes, for the last year or so, and of course now I'm confined to California. So that's where I'm speaking from. So I would say good evening to everybody, but it's still morning where I am. So that's why I have my cup of tea here. Anyway, let me get started. I'm going to have a few slides of introduction, and then I'll get into the butterflies and primates. In 2019, I had the great privilege to volunteer for 10 weeks in the Kibale Forest National Park in southwestern Uganda, which is right here. It's contiguous with Queen Elizabeth Park and about 25 kilometers east of the Ruwenzori Mountains. I was based at the Makerere University Biological Field Station in the Kanyawara sector of the forest, right along the northwest edge. The field station is an important center for studies of primates, forest ecology and regeneration, human-wildlife conflict, and many, many other topics. It also hosts field courses for students from Uganda, the UK, and Canada. More years ago than I care to admit, the very first course in Kibale, a field course in animal behavior, was taught to grad students from a university in New York City. And I was asked to manage the students' camp, and that's how I first went to the Kibale. So this is just one shot of this beautiful, beautiful forest. And over 50 years of research, Makerere's trail crew has cut and maintained about 150 kilometers of trails like this one. My work, and I'll just be very brief on this, I spent 4 to 5 hours a day walking many of these trails and recorded the presence or absence of metal tags that identified trail intersections so that missing tags could be replaced. Elephants, baboons, and tree falls are responsible for most of the missing tags. I had free time to wander, observe, and photograph. Kibale is a spectacularly beautiful forest and one of my favorite places on the planet. The forest comprises some 770 square kilometers of mostly tropical moist forest, but also has wetlands, grasslands, and woodland. Elevations range between 1,100 and 1,600 meters. All of this supports an amazing diversity and abundance of life. So I'll just briefly show you, identify what I can and what I can't identify. If anybody knows what it's a picture of, I would appreciate if you would just shout it out. Chimpanzee, which you probably know. Unidentified dragonfly. Hermine glider butterfly. This is the blue-headed agama lizard, one of the species of safari ants, bushbuck. I think this is a fly. White-headed wood hoopoe. Unidentified fungus, one of the many species of dung beetles, black and white mannequin, and one of the fakes, perhaps a strangler, that is being hosted by this unidentified tree. Elephants are definitely in the forest, and you can see some of their marks, like their, slipping and sliding, which we all did in the forest. They left a slightly bigger mark, of course, and they leave deep footprints, which you always want to avoid because they're very mucky. You can get stuck in them. And here is my forest companion, Richard Karamagi. He's listening for elephant sounds like vocalizations, stomach rumblings, or branches breaking before we descend into the swamps. These are a favorite feeding habitat for elephants and not a place where you can easily run from them. I never actually saw elephants in Kibale, but I did see a lot of butterflies and primates, and that's what I mostly photographed, and we'll show you some of these now. Kibale has about 250 species of butterflies, and this mixed species group is standing in dung that has been partly liquefied by the rains, and they're drinking up the soupy liquid. This behavior is called mud puddling. Mostly males mud puddle, and they're getting sodium, which is a critical nutrient that's missing from their plant-based diet. The males will then pass this sodium to females during copulation, which reportedly enhances reproductive success. I was in Kibale during the rainy season when mud puddling was in full swing. And this is one of the many beautiful butterflies, the central emperor swallowtail. Here you can see the red glider butterfly's extended proboscis, which it uses much like a straw to suck up the soupy dung. This is one of my favorites, the beautiful blue mother of pearl. And it has to be in sunlight, as it is here, to bring out that gorgeous iridescence of the blues and the purples. Excuse me, I'm quite a bit squeamish about caterpillars, I'm ashamed to admit. So I was determined to photograph as many as I could. On the left, this is the fairly well camouflaged forester caterpillar, and here's the butterfly that it turns into. These I could not identify, just interesting variation on caterpillars. And here is the caterpillar of a moth from the Noctuidae family that's been parasitized by a braconid wasp. So the wasp had injected her eggs into the caterpillar's body with a stinger-like ovipositor. When the eggs hatched, the larvae fed off the bodily fluids of the noctuid, avoiding its vital organs in order to keep it alive a little longer. When the larvae were ready to pupate, they chewed their way through the caterpillar's body, spun their pupa, these white appendages, and eventually will emerge as adult wasps. The caterpillar will die soon from having slowly but surely been eaten alive. All I can say is that I found this guy quite charming. Sorry, okay. He's like a gymnast there. In a rainforest, there's drama at all scales, as I discovered. So this ant went back and forth between this butterfly and this Crossley's forest queen. And then just after I took the photo, I saw the ant walking along the queen's proboscis towards the butterfly's head. And it's not a great picture, but this is the ant. Here's the head. It was like millimeters away from the head of the queen. And then the butterfly started to violently shake its wings. and body, it dislodged the ant and flew off a few meters where it rested quietly with its wings open. It seemed to be recovering its nerves after that close encounter. Here's 4 more just lovely butterflies. I photographed about 45 of the 250 or so species in Kibale, so I'm eager to return and see what else I can find. Now, just a short break before we get to primates. Here's a few of Kibale's 350 species of birds. There was always time for birds, especially when they were visible. Those of you who've ever tried to photograph in just about any kind of forest know how difficult it can be. So the red-headed malimbe, the great blue turaco, chestnut wattle-eye, honey-guide greenbull, and the amazing black and white casqued hornbill. When it flies fairly low over the canopy, you can hear its wings flapping. It's very loud and just a really beautiful, beautiful sound. I think that none of these birds get more southerly than about Zambia. Most of them are restricted to forest in the tropical part of the continent. So now a look at Kibale's many primates. This is the black and white colobus, one of 7 monkey species in the Kibale Forest. A possible 8th species would be vervet monkeys that may occasionally be present in the southern part of the forest. There are also 3 species of bush babies and patos, all nocturnal and none of which I saw. And then there's 1 ape species, which I will show you. So this is an adult male, black and white. There is some sexual dimorphism in this species. It's a little dark, but I think maybe you can see the very pronounced temporal mounds that females lack, and you'll see that in another slide. And then it's got this unbroken circle of white fur around the ischial callosities. And in the female, there's a break right here. The males have a wonderful roaring call that builds to a crescendo, which is probably used for spacing of groups. It's usually heard in the early morning and at night. I wish I had recordings to share with you, but you could find them on YouTube. Black and white colobus are primarily leaf eaters. They have a 2-chambered stomach that allows them to ferment and digest mature leaves, but they do prefer the younger leaves, which are higher in protein. So you often see them grabbing the ends of a branch where the young leaves have just come out. On this adult female, you can see the circle of white fur that's broken here. And also you can see that her temporal mounds are slightly less pronounced than in the male. So this very distressed infant approached the female screaming for reasons that I never found out. And female black and white colobus are known to help in rearing young ones other than their own infant. So it's possible this was just the closest female to the infant, and he went to her, or it went to her. I don't know what sex the infant was, rather than, it may not be the mother. But I was really impressed with how she laid her hands on the infant and remained calmly and quietly with it, soothing the infant until it finally was calm and left to join some other youngsters. This is the red colobus, with a beautiful combination of the red fur on top and the sort of grayish and brownish silky fur below. Like the black and white colobus, red colobus are also primarily folivorous, and their multi-chambered stomach functions somewhat like a cow, as does the black and whites. So they too can eat tougher, more fibrous leaves that ferment and break down. Because of the digestive process, both of the colobus species tend to be more sedentary than the non-colobine monkeys. Of all the leaps I saw among all the monkeys, those of the red colobus were by far the most impressive. And sometimes this leap might be life-saving because the Kibale Forest chimps in the Kanyawara sector of the forest and one other part of the forest hunt and eat red colobus. And in one section of the forest, they have basically created local extinction of the red colobus, and so they're on to hunting black and white colobus and basically whatever they can catch. Both colobus species are primarily arboreal, but sometimes they come to the ground. One sunny day, some red colobus came out of the trees by the research houses, and as soon as they hit the ground, the larger juveniles just started jumping up and down, and it really seemed as though they were just joyful at being liberated from the danger of falling out of a tree. And then this juvenile red colobus noticed that there was a group of black and white colobus about 50 meters away, and it ran over to this juvenile black and white, and they kind of took turns jumping up and down, until finally this red colobus ran back to its troop. This was a young juvenile female black and white, and she just seemed to me, the way she was waving her arms and walking bipedally, that she was almost dancing as she moved through the grass. Quite a sight. Both species also leave the trees to gnaw on the plaster walls of the houses and to lick the cracks in the cement floor. Like the mud-puddling butterflies sucking up diluted dung, the colobus are getting sodium, which they don't get from their strictly plant-based diet. Now on to the olive baboon. This male is highly aroused following a very noisy chase of another male that had to do with competition over an estrus female. This troop was quite habituated to humans, and we could get quite close, so much so that one had to watch them carefully when they came around to the field station housing. Females and juveniles are especially audacious and will snatch a lunch left on the veranda or crawl in through an open window and wreak havoc while they search for edibles. Adult males are actually more aloof. They pass by you and barely acknowledge your existence. Grooming was a late afternoon activity, and so this adult male is being groomed by this adult female. And it always seemed as though every adult male I saw being groomed by an adult female was always in some blissed out state, just truly zoned out, and also perhaps more tolerant of infants clambering over their body. This adult male is in the forest and eating some kind of tuberous root. Baboons are both arboreal and terrestrial, feeding from all levels of the forest. Olive baboons occur across the tropical belt in evergreen forest, savanna, and woodland. This troop ranged strictly within the Kibale Forest. These are gray-cheeked mangabes. This is a subadult female and an adult male. You can see the lovely sculpted cheeks, which is how I probably would have named it. This adult male is eating the flowers of erythrina. I think it's Erythrina abyssinica, but maybe one of you knows for sure. Mangabes have a simpler stomach than the colobines, and they are primarily fruit eaters. They also take flowers, as you can see, seeds, invertebrates, and very occasionally they have been seen to catch and eat small mammals like bush baby or squirrel. I'm always interested in interspecies interactions. In this case, this juvenile male mangabey had come to the ground while the baboon's troop was fairly nearby. But this baboon and the mangabey just kept looking at each other, very curious about each other. And suddenly the male baboon went over and mounted the mangabey, who then just dashed into the forest. Sometime later, that same day, I saw this mangabey drag a dead branch away from this same baboon, and looking very carefully to make sure that the baboon wasn't following too closely. The baboon left him alone, but while the mangabey was eating, he kept what I thought was a nervous eye on the baboon. You can see the crumbs dropping from him as he feeds. He's probably getting beetle larvae from the dead wood. This is a blue monkey, adult male and adult female. It's closely related to your Southern African Simango monkey. And some sources say that it's a different subspecies of Midas, while others claim it's a completely different species, the Albogularis. This is the red-tailed monkey, named for an obvious reason. It's omnivorous, eats primarily fruit, and is restricted to mostly East and Central African forests. The mountain monkey, sometimes just called loisti after its species name. They're arboreal, but also terrestrial, and they very frequently come to the ground to forage for fallen fruits, mushrooms, invertebrates, and they are probably the hardest of the 7 species to follow in the forest. So they're the least well studied, at least in the Kibale Forest. Now we get to the chimpanzee. This was an older female and her son. They belonged to the only chimp group in the Kanyawara sector of Kibale where I was. They've been studied almost daily for over 30 years, and they're quite well habituated. Observers are ordered to stay 7 meters away at a minimum, but the chimps will often come closer, though there's no attempt on the human's part to interact with them. So this is the older female, and this is her young son. And here, the same female is grooming her adult son. And if you notice these beautiful, gnarled old hands, I just love those. This older male lay down for what we thought was going to be a nap while Richard and I sat down, maybe 10 meters away watching. But he was so restless, this chimp, he just couldn't find a comfortable position, and he tossed and he turned and changed position and grabbed his feet and, just stared off into the forest. And after 15 minutes of trying to relax, or we thought he was trying to relax, his siesta was brought to an end by a forest cobra, which is fairly common in the forest, and it slithered by, I would say, about 1 to 2 meters from the chimp. And both Richard and the chimp saw it at the same time, stood up, and they each quickly moved backwards, and that was the end of that siesta. These are my acknowledgements. So many people were so helpful and supportive. You can read them when this gets posted to Facebook if you're interested. One final slide. We had what we hope will be Kibale's first of many annual Marches for Science. It was just a great event. The field station enthusiastically supported it. The Uganda Wildlife Authority sent about 8 or 10 people to march with us. There were well over 100 school kids, field assistants, graduate students, scientists, and people from the local community. The kids made signs, and we marched, and we came back to the field station, and there were speeches and opportunities for the kids to ask questions about the forest and the animals. And then the day ended with a great feast. And we actually registered this march with the march organizers, which I think are based in DC. And so we got counted with everybody else who was marching around the world. And that's the end. So how do I, let's see.
Thank you very much, Karen. That was amazing. That was very nice forest. And I think you have to answer on the top.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it was amazing and amazing pictures and wildlife. And thank you so much for the information about the primates. It was really, really nice.
Thank you.
So the people in the chat put some of the identification for the dung beetle and for some butterflies, but I'm afraid we don't have questions, time for questions now. So I will just, share the contact emails to
That's fine.
Information.
Yeah.
So
Okay. And thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you for your identifications. How will I retrieve those? Or I guess I better get them now, right?
Yeah. So you can have in the chat. You can go up and you can read them. But anyway, I always save the chat so then I can send them or put you in contact. It was Steve with the butterflies and someone else with a dung beetle. But yeah, I will. You can save the chat, or at the end I can send you the chat as well.
Okay, I just want to respond to one thing really quickly.
Yeah.
Zandre said that these expressions of caring and joy makes one thing think that each individual, I assume you're talking about primates, may have a unique personality as well. Absolutely true. I mean, I've spent a lot of time watching monkeys. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was nice. So now we will go for